our password policy. So those are the 10 questions that we would recommend that you ask as part of the manager's audit for information security in your company relative to domain number 3. Now let's take a look at an executive overview of what's addressed in domain number 4. Okay, the fourth domain is applications and systems development security. It centers on the securing of application and operating system components and the measurement of their effectiveness. So we'll focus here on, for today's lecture, just on web apps, on cross-site scripting, and then talk a little bit more about OWASP. We mentioned OWASP.org in the previous lecture on InfoSec. We'll talk a little bit more about that in this domain. Okay, so web apps are programs that were once based on operating system software and needed to be installed on a computer to perform some action. Those programs have been web-enabled. And now, from someplace outside the corporation, you can access these applications. What happens if, when you web-enabled these applications, you didn't pay special attention to making sure that potentially bad guys with malicious intent outside the corporation on some computer in the Samoan Islands or actually somewhere else that you are not going to be able to get to, aren't manipulating your servers through the applications that exist on those servers that you've web-enabled. Web apps send and retrieve data from an information system via HTML commands over the internet. They allow for great portability of systems, but that portability comes with a high price if they're not using security basics. So attackers know HTML code. That's an easy thing. And if the information you send or retrieve from your information system is not encrypted, attackers can manipulate that data and make the system perform actions based on their preferences. Cross-site scripting is another example of a web vulnerability. It allows an attacker to gather information from a user by way of a web app, and basically cross-site scripting is when you're tricked into going to a site that's a false site. So the attacker here sends an email to you, and the email asks you to click here. When you click here, you think you're going to one computer over here, but in actuality, you're going to another computer. And this other computer asks you for information. For example, there's a common combination of social engineering and cross-site scripting that I continue to see over and over out on the web. An email comes in from a website at chase.com and claims to be an email from Chase Bank, and the assumption here is you have a Chase Bank account, and a lot of people do. I do. A lot of people have Chase credit cards. And it claims that there's been a violation or some other way. It tricks you into going to your account and putting in your login and password. So you click on the link and it takes you to a site, and the site's address is www.chase.com/something or other, and so you assume that this is a Chase Bank site, and it pops up the exact same screen that you would see if you were at the Chase Bank site, only of course not on the Chase Bank site server, on some bad guy's server, and it asks you to put in your login and password. And so you do that, and it will just come back and say, sorry, wrong password, please try again. And then it will redirect you to the actual Chase website. Well, what's interesting to note here is Chase's domain name is not chase.com. Surprise, surprise. Chase's domain name is chasemorgan.com. And so somebody out there applied for and got the domain name chase.com. And when they send around email to people with Chase Bank accounts, those folks assume that that's legitimate email. And that's all an example of what we mean by cross-site scripting. Okay, the Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, maintains, it's a free guide and set of services for helping corporations secure their web apps, and they maintain a set of tools and suggestions that will help you determine and develop web apps that are secure. So, question, do you plan against buffer overflows? Do you protect against SQL injection, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a whole list of these common programming security violations that programmers commit without knowing it, listed out at OWASP and explained and guidance given as to how to avoid having those in your system and how to detect if they are in your programs. And so that becomes then a pretty authoritative guide that if you pass this on to your software development folks and say, from now on all of our software must conform to these guidelines, then you will have gone a long way towards securing your web-based applications. So brief review here. For this domain, you need to deal with web applications. You need to deal with cross-site scripting threats. And you want to make sure that you have implemented the OWASP security guidelines for software development. All right, now that you've taken a look at the executive overview of the content and concerns in domain number 4, let's take a look at the manager audit questions relative to this domain. So the first one is, do your software developers understand and use the OWASP guidelines for software development? Again, if you need to get smarter about what those are, go out to the OWASP.org website. And how does management ensure that the developers are following these guidelines? Okay. Question number 2. What do your software developers do to guarantee that your applications are not vulnerable to buffer overflow problems or SQL injection problems, or that your developers are using maintenance hooks, which they shouldn't be? And this really is just a follow-on to question number 1. But these are good specific follow-on questions to ask. All right, so we only have 2 questions there for your manager's audit relative to domain number 4. Now let's take a look at cryptography, domain number 5. And then we'll talk about manager audit questions at the end of that for domain number 5. The 5th domain is cryptography. In this domain, we discuss the different technologies available for encrypting data for the purpose of protecting that information. So we're going to discuss 3 methods commonly in use as public key, infrastructure, steganography, and VPN. Public key infrastructure is the encryption methodology that's commonly used today when you get on the web and you see a little gold key or a locked padlock and you're typing something in and you know that it's sent encrypted. That's being done with PKI. Basically, to transmit data securely, a corporation uses this method, and they would send their public key to a party intending to transmit, and the party would encrypt the transmission using the public